Well, a lot's happened in the last couple months, hasn't it? I mean, here we are again, separated from one another. And in actuality, it's separation that comes really this morning because of a potential threat. We know that some of our number have tested positive for COVID, and we don't know whether that has been passed on to others already. It's an unknown. So really, the fact that we are closing up the building for worship this morning and doing it like this is done simply out of extreme caution. And you know what? There are going to definitely be some who will applaud that decision, who will think it's wise. But there also will be some who don't think that we should let fear keep us from living, and that of all things, what we should be doing is getting together to worship. You're going to have people that are going to run the spectrum in the ways that they think. Now, maybe here with this particular group, it may not be so diverse, but across the board, that's the way that a lot of people feel. When we come together, we require the wearing of masks for the safety of others as outlined by our state government. And you know, there are some who applaud that decision and who think it's wise and it's properly dutiful. But then there are also some who do not think that is the case and believe that masks are a symbol of control more than an effective deterrent of the virus, and Christians should not be giving in to the government in such a way. These are real thoughts that real people have. Once again, not necessarily among this group, but just in general. Just yesterday, our media in the nation finally declared the next president, Joe Biden, will be the 46th president. And you know, there are some people who are excited about the change of leadership. They're looking forward to the prospect of another president, of a new era. And then there are some who are not looking forward to what President-elect Biden and his presidency might bring. Spend some time on Facebook, Twitter, or fill-in-the-blank social media platform du jour, and you're going to see all kinds of vitriol, accusations, mockery, schadenfreude. I mean, it's not pretty. You're going to see all kinds of stuff. In fact, even though the media has declared it, there's all kinds of people who are saying, well, we are not going to accept it until. You know, I've even seen people, Christians, even one who is a gospel preacher, talking about picking up arms if necessary. It is amazing, really, that in the midst of all this division and the inability to live civilly anymore, that we have hit this exact point in the Sermon on the Mount with this sermon this morning. Because after the introduction of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus makes it clear that everything, again, remember the whole thesis for the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5, verse 20, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you can by no means enter into the kingdom of heaven. Everything, I think, throughout the Sermon on the Mount has to do with a comparison between kingdom citizenship and the citizenship in the kingdom that the scribes and the Pharisees are trying to talk about, what they try to teach, what they try to live. And so as we begin now, starting in chapter 5, verse 21, we're now going to get into a section that deals very specifically with how people treat one another. And we will begin this morning with the first section in which Jesus makes, after his thesis statement in Matthew 5:21, he gives this command. He says, "You have heard that it was said, 'Do not murder.'" Well, good morning. Again, it is good for us to, in a sense, be together in the way that we are. It's crazy, the ability that we have to actually be together, whether it's Zoom, whether streaming on YouTube, whatever the case is, that we have an opportunity to still stay connected even when we're unable to be together. Something unheard of just years ago, and something that, this group right here, just 1 year ago, was something that was just a dream in our minds of what could be. And here we are. It's a reality. And we have this opportunity. It's such an incredible blessing for us. And I appreciate the opportunity, the fact that you, right now, even though you are at home, you have made the decision that you're going to focus on God this morning, that you're going to worship God this morning, and that you're doing it collectively. It says a lot about you, and I really do appreciate you being here, being a part of this morning. And I hope that we will be able to be encouraged by looking at this section of Scripture, which may not be the most encouraging as we look at it. It actually becomes rather challenging. Because what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 21, here Jesus begins, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. Whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny." Now note Jesus' language right here as we begin. And you see this very first section here, verses 21 and 22. He's making a comparison from the very beginning. You have heard this, but I say to you this. And so we have a comparison. What is this comparison being made? Now, I can remember, sitting and listening to sermons or sitting in a class talking about this, and I can remember hearing that the comparison that Jesus is making is the difference between the old law and the new law. The fact that the old law was a physical, that Jesus is saying, here's what you were taught before, and this is what the Old Testament tells you, and it's all about the physical, but the New Testament, this is all about the spiritual. I even have a Bible in which I have that clearly written in. The old law talks, physical action, but the new law is inside and spiritual. At some point, I wrote that down in this Bible from a sermon or whatever the case, because I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Because that's the way we often think, that old law and all their physical stuff, but the new law is what's really important, and the spiritual stuff. I don't really think that's what's going on here. I think it kind of misses the point when we try to use this section to say Jesus is comparing the Old Testament to the New Testament and saying that things are different now from what they used to be. Folks, Jesus, he's not teaching a comparison of Old Testament teaching to New Testament teaching. And you can see this clearly when you go to chapter 5, verse 43. And Jesus says, "You've heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.'" So if this is about what the Old Testament says compared to what the New Testament says, you should be able to go to the Old Testament and find where God said in the law of Moses, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Spoiler alert, you're not going to find it. It's not there. You can scour the pages of Moses. You're not going to find the words, hate your enemy. This is not a comparison of the law of Moses to the law of Christ or any such thing. Jesus is not speaking to what the old law says. He's speaking about what is being taught concerning the old law. He's teaching about how the scribes and the Pharisees, how they were teaching the law of Moses, or the law of God, incorrectly. And we can tell what Jesus' critique is of the scribes and the Pharisees by looking at how he corrects their teaching. He says, here's what y'all have been taught by these scribes and Pharisees in the way that they're teaching this, but let me tell you right now, they're messing it up. They're not right in the way that they're teaching it. This is the correct way. This is the way that you should understand it. This is the way that you should see it. You have heard is the language dealing with the teaching of the rabbis that have been handed down, the traditions of the elders, as Jesus talks about later in Matthew, what the rabbis from generation to generation have passed down concerning this teaching, and their authority comes from what Rabbi so-and-so said, 120 years ago about the law. That's where they found their authority. But Jesus, we're going to find at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he doesn't teach with the authority of the rabbis. He teaches by his own authority. And it's a different teaching. That's what the contrast is. It's Jesus' teaching concerning citizenship in the kingdom, compared to what the scribes and the Pharisees would teach about citizenship in the kingdom. And so we begin the contrast, looking at this law, do not murder. Jesus, as he is now correcting, he says, you've heard that they were taught, do not murder. Instead, what does he say? But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother. Murder is being compared to simply being angry. Now, it is important that we make a distinction here. I do not believe that this is any kind of anger at all. If my son Jonathan annoys Olivia, my little girl, and she gets mad, she ends up angry at him, has she crossed this line that Jesus is talking about right here? Especially if 10 minutes later she's in a good mood, she's forgotten it, everything is fine. Well, no, of course not. This right here, what Jesus is talking about, it's important we understand this. He is not talking about momentary, reactionary, hothead anger or the loss of temper. That's not what he's addressing here. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that it's okay to be a hothead and to fly off the handle at any point in time. It's just, that's not what Jesus is addressing right here. He's not talking about people who get upset. He qualifies what he's talking about here with words that he attaches to this anger. Now, there are a couple terms in this section that kind of lose a lot of their meaning. They kind of get lost in translation, and it's highly unfortunate because those terms really help us to understand. Now, I don't do this very often. I'm very hesitant to do it, but I think it's important for you to at least understand, that there are Greek terms that carry certain connotations with them that are here. So I want to bring out these terms. The first one that he uses is raka, which means empty head. That is someone who's foolish, who has no mental capacity for reason. That's the first thing, that you yell at someone that you are dumb, you are foolish, you have no ability for rational thought. And he also uses another term, more. And this one, it means someone who is empty of heart. There's no moral compass. They're devoid of feelings, is kind of the idea. And so these are the two terms, really, that Jesus is associating with being angry, calling someone an empty head, empty heart person. So go ahead and put these together, and what is he saying? someone who doesn't have the ability to reason or to feel. In other words, this is taking away the humanity of a person. Jesus is saying is that this anger looks at a person and sees this person as less than human. In a sense, you're basically saying to this person, I wish you were dead, or at the very least, your life is nothing in my eyes. You mean nothing to me. This isn't just a, hey, moron, that you yell out while you're driving down the road and someone pulls out in front of you. Folks, Jesus is talking about two people who have a relationship and one disdains the other individual as being beneath him. This is, by the way, the first step to murder. See, the moment where you determine that someone else's life is not really life anyway, that person has no right to a life, they don't actually exist as a human. Once you can get your mind thinking about a person in that way, you have to do that in order to get to the point where you are willing to take their life from them. It's hard to say these things and not think of an issue that's been very important to many people throughout this election cycle and many others, that of a woman's ability to abort a child with impunity. Now, first and foremost, talking about things like this, which carries so much baggage in our society, it's not easy. And we need to be hesitant to make everything absolute black and white issues. That's just kind of a naive way to go through life. And I want to make sure, I really don't know the church here well enough, but I do want to say this. If you are a part of this church, or if you're just listening right now, if you are engaging, if you are part of this right now, and you have gone through this procedure before, I want you to know that there is love and there is healing in God and in His church. As a part of this church, you are in a place where a decision that you have made in your past, if it weighs on you, I want you to know that we are here for you. This is not a message of guilt or condemnation over something that you have done in your past. I want you to know that there is hope, no matter what you've done moving forward. And if you need to talk to somebody about this, I offer myself, I'm sure our elders and others could talk to you about this. And I don't want you to feel alienated because of a sin that you have committed and you think, well, apparently I can't be a part of this group or any other because I've committed this sin. Well, if that was the basis, nobody could be a part of this group. So know that that is the case. But it is also important to speak out for those who don't have the opportunity to speak for themselves. Again, I don't treat this like a black and white issue. There's so many complications that come up from a pregnancy that's not desired, that's not planned. It forever changes a woman's life. But that's part of what we have in a sinful world. In a perfect world, children would only be the gifts that bless a union that's been joined together in the presence of God with the end result that God is glorified. But that's just not the reality that we live in on this side of Genesis 3. We live in a fallen world. We live in a world where things do not always go as intended. We live in a world where difficult choices have to be made. And the easiest way to make the choice to have an abortion is to think of that child in these terms. Empty of head. There's no rational cognitive thought. Empty of heart. They don't really have feelings. This child is not a real person. And if we can convince ourselves of this concerning that, then we can take away the child's humanity. at which point the murder becomes easier. You know, it's been estimated that there have been over 1 billion abortions that have taken place worldwide. 1 billion humans who were tragically killed before they had a chance to demonstrate to the world the ways in which they were made in the image of God. 1 billion times in which murders have occurred justified because in the womb it's easier to think of the child as empty-headed and empty-hearted. This is what Jesus is talking about. And this is nothing new. This is the formula for any widespread hatred and evil that's done against others. It was necessary for the Germans to think the way that they did about Jews in the middle of the 20th century in order to do the horrendous things that were done. It was necessary for many nations, including ours, to do what was done to citizens of African tribes during the slave trade, or to do what was done during to indigenous populations in what was Eurocentrically called a new world. You first have to convince yourself that someone else is subhuman. They're less than you. They're not worthy to be called equal to you. You have to think of them as empty of head, empty of heart. And you can only, or it's only after that you can then proceed to murder. See, that was the scribes and the Pharisees' position on this. Do not murder. I mean, you can think whatever you want about a person as long as you never pick up the knife and stab someone with it, you're just fine. Jesus says it goes well beyond simply refraining from the action itself. It has to do with what's going on inside your head towards that person as well. The scribes and Pharisees, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, they will probably say hatred is not a good idea. But they certainly wouldn't necessarily say hatred in itself is sinful. Jesus says that looking at someone, calling them empty head and empty heart, disdaining them so much that you can't even consider them on your level and worthy of your attention, which, by the way, is the way that the Pharisees treated the Gentiles. It's the way they treated the tax collectors. It's the way they treated those blatant sinners. It's the way they treated all of those people that Jesus very specifically sought out, went to, and demonstrated love towards, right? It's looking at them as below them. Jesus says, y'all have already committed murder in your heart. Had they followed through with it, in Genesis chapter 37, the scribes and Pharisees would say that Joseph's brothers were guilty of murder in Genesis chapter 37 and verse 20 when they threw him into the pit and he left them there to die. Jesus would say that they were guilty of murder in chapter 37 and verse 4 when we're told that Joseph's brothers hated him and could not speak to him peacefully. Joseph's brothers could not treat him like an equal. He was beneath them. He meant nothing to them. And what happened? Murder. I mean, we know the story. We know what eventually happened. They let him out. Don't let that take away from what they intended to do, what they were actually acting out. You know, one of the most disturbing verses really in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 37, verse 25. They throw Joseph into the pit. They intend to kill him. And we find out later that he is screaming and yelling for mercy. And what did they do? They sat down to eat. Their brother in the background crying out to them, and they're fixing sandwiches like, hey, can you pass the mustard? That's just cold and pretty disturbing. Folks, their sin did not begin when they threw him into the pit. It began when their hatred rose to the level where they dehumanized him. And that's exactly what Jesus' point is here. According to the scribes and Pharisees, you can hate all you want to as long as you never pick up the knife and do the action. Or we can say as long as you don't leave your brother in the pit, they were fine because they eventually took him out, right? That was fine. They didn't actually kill him. Well, no. First of all, because of what they did do, they did sell him into slavery, but also, even if they had taken him out of the pit, even if everything would have gone back to normal, life would have been what it was before, as if nothing happened, they would still be guilty before God, guilty of hatred, guilty of murder in their hearts towards their brother. And right now, the dismissal of others is happening everywhere in our society, whether it be those who disdains the ones who treat the virus as unimportant, or those who act dismissively towards it, towards those who take it seriously and expect others to. There's all kinds of problem, whether it be those who have supported Joe Biden for president, and they are elated to have him as president, or those who think that Donald Trump should have won the election and believe that he did, and there's some kind of corruption that is changing it. Folks, it's coming out on both sides. Both sides are full of vitriol, sarcasm, and especially you have, I've used this word before, schadenfreude. It's such a handy word to have. In case you're not familiar with the term, it's a German phrase. It describes people who take pleasure in others' misfortunes. That is people who look at other people and the bad things and they enjoy the fact that bad things are happening to other people. And you have people who felt dismissed and marginalized over the last 4 years who are just loving it. The fact that all of these Trump supporters are getting what's due to them now. Folks, it's not a proper Christian attitude. You see it all over the place. Dismissive language, hatred, coming from those who support Biden, from those who support Trump, those who will never accept the results of the election. They believe that the Democrats have cheated. And you see how easy that is right there? Just give a label to a group. Call them Democrats. Call them Republicans. Call them liberals, call them conservatives, snowflakes, boomers, whatever. Those are all tricks that we use to dehumanize people. We don't have to think of them as a real person anymore. We lump them in with the group, and all of that group over there are people who are empty of head and empty of heart, and we don't have to reconcile the fact that these are people made in the image of God and loved by God and should be loved by us. This is exactly what Jesus is speaking about right here. Folks, this is not the way that Christians should be involved in any way, shape, or form. But unfortunately, it is all over the place. Your eternal soul is on the line here. Now, again, we're brand new to this church. We've been here 1 year. It's coming up on the 1 year date. When I had the first official sermon, the move-in date was 1 year ago, just a couple days ago. I don't know what's really happening in everyone's lives. I mean, we got here and the world shut down. I should know many of you a lot more than I do right now, and we will. We'll get to know you. But I will say this. It's pretty easy to put on a good front when you're around the church. I want to implore with you right now, if you have 1, 2, more people, whatever the case, that you just loathe, those people that you hate, people that you have decided they're not worthy of your love, they're not worthy of your compassion or your forgiveness. If you have those people in your life that just you just can't think about them without hatred, you need to do something about that. I don't know what. I don't know how. Only you know the specifics of your actions. But if you have these people in your life, whether they are even alive today or not, I want you to do something. I want you to forgive them. And quite frankly, it's not me. God wants you to forgive them. In fact, right now, I want you to think of someone. Think of someone who has hurt you, who's done something to you. Someone that raises your hackles every time that you think about that person. Do you have someone in mind right now? You might have to go back in your life to find that person. Can you think of them? Do you have them right now in your mind? Can you picture that person? Now, if you have that person in your head, repeat after me. Seriously. I forgive you. Go ahead, say that, please, out loud. Say it out loud, where you are right now. If you've got that person in your head, sitting on your couch, sitting in your chair, wherever you are right now, please say this. I forgive you. Now, if everyone was here, I would hear if people participated, and I would be confident, okay, good. So I'm going to do it one more time because I really want you to say these words. You've got a picture in your head of this person. You know them, you loathe them, you hate them, they've done something, and I want you to say the words right now, thinking of them. Say it with me. I forgive you. Folks, it doesn't matter what they've done to you. It might be an abusive father or an abusive spouse. It might be that kid who humiliated you in junior high and altered your life. It might be that boss who made you feel inadequate in life. It might be that teacher who molested your child. It might be the mechanic who messed up your car. I don't know who or what it is. I don't need to know who or what it is, but you do. And you need to say these words. I forgive you. Now, I know you said the words. I'm counting on it. But tonight, you need to mean those words. Before you go to sleep tonight, you need to let the weight off of your heart. That grudge, that hurt, that emotional albatross that you need to discard. By the power of God, you can and you will and you need to, because your eternal destination is on the line. And now that you've considered that person, the person who has wronged you, and you have forgiven them, perhaps you have realized in your life, maybe you have wronged some other people as well. So what do you do in that circumstance? If you're offering your gift by the altar, there remember your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. This, to me, is one of the most difficult passages in the Bible. It really is. It would be so much easier if Jesus had said, if you have something against your brother, that is, if your brother has done something to you, then you need to go to him and give him an opportunity to make that right. That would be great. I wish that that's what this said, but it doesn't. Here it says, if you have done something against your brother. That is, you realize that you have done something to them, you've hurt them, you've offended them, you've done something by which they need to forgive you. You need to go to them and make it right. And this is difficult for a lot of reasons. First of all, you have to admit that you are wrong. And let's face it, that's just not easy to do. It is so much easier to know when someone else has wronged you, because then you actually feel the injustice. It hurts. It is much more difficult to know when you've done something wrong to someone else, because you've got all kinds of justified reasons for it. I mean, let me ask this. How many of y'all have ever been driving down the road, minding your own business, doing your thing, and you see a car that's up there on the right, and it's kind of wavering, and then suddenly it pulls out, and you have to slam on your brakes or swerve lanes or whatever the case in order to get around it. Has that happened to anyone before? Yeah? How'd you feel about that one, huh? Probably laid on the horn, maybe a couple, you morons, coming out or whatever. Well, let me ask this. How many of y'all have ever come up to a road, looked, didn't see anything, looked and whatever, started to come out, and as soon as you start to make the turn, you realize that there was a car in your blind spot, or you just happened to miss it, and then here you are pulling out, and you cause that car to slam on its brakes, or it swerves over to the other side, or whatever. Has that ever happened to anyone? Huh? You ever done that to someone before? Yeah. Well, let me ask this. In which of those two scenarios were you really upset and wished that there was some kind of justice in the world? Probably not the second one, right? We understand that. It's much harder to consider injustice when you are the one who has caused the injustice. That's why this is so difficult. And even then, how often does it go both ways? How often does this go two different ways at the same time? Just look at the story of Samson with the Philistines and the ways in which anger and revenge, they escalate throughout the story. Everyone feels wronged by the other's actions, and everyone feels perfectly justified by their own actions, and yet nobody has a perfect sense of justice, and everybody makes a whole mess of everything. That's why this passage is so hard. Because quite often, if you have wronged someone, there's a good chance either they wronged you first and they deserved it, or they wronged you afterwards in revenge, and you're certainly not going to accept that. But I want to note here that this is not conditional in any way, shape, or form on what the other person has or has not done. Kingdom righteousness does not presume to handle justice on its own. It leaves that to God. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, declares the Lord. We leave it up to the king to take care of justice. And the message here is very clear. If we think that God is going to be happy with our offering of worship, our praise, glory, honor, that we do adore him, then our sacrifice in the kingdom, which is giving our entire lives to him, Romans chapter 12, folks, if we come to the altar without first dealing with the wrongs that we've committed towards others, God is not interested in that offering. He doesn't want our offering. And that's harsh. But that means it's now on us. It is our job. Without reference to what somebody else does, it is on us to make peace with the one that we have wronged. Even if that wrong is simply calling them empty of head or empty of heart, even if they have wronged us before or in return, even if our wrong is simply dehumanizing them to the point where we're basically saying, I would be better off if you were dead. Even if it's that person that you thought of earlier, that one who has done such atrocious things to you that has caused loathing, perhaps has affected every part of your life, and you've had that just deep hatred. Even that person, especially that person, you need to, if it's possible, come to terms quickly with them and tell them you are sorry. If you're able to contact them, tell them you're sorry. Please know, this doesn't say that you have to become friends with them. It does not say that you must invite them into your house or back into your life. Though if you are able to do such a thing and win such a person over to Christ, wouldn't that be just an amazing demonstration of the power of the gospel at work within us? But folks, all Jesus is asking here is this: reach out to them, tell them you're sorry. Forgive them to the point that you are able to see them differently. Now they're simply a broken, sinful child of man made in the image of God who's really messed up. See them more as just empty of head and empty of heart. And for some, you may not have the opportunity if that person is beyond reach. Maybe they have passed on from this life. But you can still deal with this with God personally. He is loving. He is merciful. But he has an expectation of us that when we have wronged someone else, even if they deserved it in our own mind, that we will make it right with them. because that case is going to come before the judge. And it's going to be a judge who is going to know every detail of the case. He will know how hard you've tried. He will know every particular of the situation. And if your apology is rejected, then so be it. Like Paul said in Romans chapter 12, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. It doesn't always depend on you. And God knows what your efforts are and what you've tried to do. Even if it might fail, you are still in the hands of a merciful and loving God. But you need to do this. Your own eternal destination is on the line. As I said, this is a very difficult passage of Scripture. Quite frankly, the Sermon on the Mount, it's not going to get any better or any easier. Jesus talks about some very weighty material in this kind of introduction to Jesus' teachings in Matthew. Next week, we will continue in chapter 5, going to the next section. But for this week, I want you to focus on yourself. Focus on your relationship with others. Make whatever changes need to be made. Remember the point that we made about in the Beatitudes, blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. When you truly understand the mercy that God has given to you, does it not then provide you the desire to be merciful towards others? Let's all pray together. Our great and merciful God, we ask now for your help. Help us to understand your mercy so that we can show it to others. Give us strength to follow Jesus' teachings concerning others. Give us your grace as we fall short. We love you, knowing that you are here with us every step of the way. And we thank you for Jesus, our King, who makes up for all our deficiencies. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.